Hello and welcome back to Open Table Adventures. As always, I am Dan the Baker, and this is another episode of Recipes for Adventures, our series where we make a little recipe based on some amazing TTRPG content from across the internet. Today's recipe is based on the amazing TTRPG system Perils and Princesses. Now this is normally where I would tell you a little bit about what Perils and Princesses is, but I think I know someone who might know it a little bit better.
Hi, I'm Ryan. I am the creator of Perils and Princesses. So Perils and Princesses is a rules-light fairy tale fantasy role-playing game. It is a adventure RPG, and it's all about humble magic. It's all about fairy tale fantasy as opposed to high fantasy or swords and sorcery or something like that. It's all about fairy tale magic and adventure.
For Perils and Princesses today, I am going to be making some almond tea cookies. One, because tea is a very princessy activity, and also because one of the princess classes is called the Kitchen Magic Princess, and she has a lot of things that they can do with tea and other things like that, and gathering and also cooking, and it just makes sense. Also, I like almond cookies. To get started, I'm just going to take my butter, my granulated sugar, my brown sugar, and mix with my hand mixer until they are light and fluffy. While I do that, Ryan, why don't you tell them a little bit more about your game?
So, Perils and Princesses was really inspired by my kids. I had always been a fan of fantasy and fairy tales, but what inspired me to make Perils and Princesses was starting to play role-playing games with my older kid, my son, who was 9 or 10 at the time, and then I have a daughter too who's now 4, and just watching, going back and watching a lot of fairy tale movies and Disney movies, and seeing how she would put on a princess dress and wield a sword, and at the same time I was playing a lot of role-playing games with my son, and just seeing how he played role-playing games and how he ran a campaign for me and how he would DM and set up his stuff. And I really wanted to bring all that together in this fairy tale world and bring in kind of how he played games and then how my younger kid was imagining things. So I went back to a lot of my favorite fantasy as a kid and started, it started with listing things and drawing and trying to imagine, what would a fairy tale princess be like in a dungeon,
Now that we are all light and fluffy like a fairy tale cloud, time to add our egg and vanilla and mix. Now for our dry ingredients, I'm going to be taking some almond flour. I'm using super fine almond flour, mostly because that is what I could find. But you can use less fine if you want. You can use almond meal, whatever you can find and whatever you prefer. Just know with almond meal, you are gonna have a grittier texture with your cookies, which some people like. Then I'm gonna add some plain flour. I'm using gluten-free flour still because I want this to remain gluten-free, but if you wanna use just regular old glutenful flour, you totally can. It works just the same. A little bit of baking powder and baking soda. And lastly, of course, is the tea. Now, this is completely optional. You don't have to add in actual tea leaves if you don't want to. I do, because I'm making a tea cookie. I want it to taste like tea. You don't have to. And I'm using Earl Grey, but you can use whichever kind of tea that you prefer. I do recommend using a black tea just because I feel like that works best with the flavors we already have going on. But, it's up to you. And give it one last mix until everything all comes together. At this point, you should have a fairly wet but still cohesive, holds together dough. I'm just gonna take this, pop it in the fridge for about 20 to 30 minutes until it firms up, and then we'll be ready to dollop it onto our tray and bake. While that's happening, Ryan, talk more.
So my interest in fantasy and fairy tales goes way back. I think I'm a designer and an illustrator, and I think movies like Sleeping Beauty and Sword in the Stone were a huge visual influence on me. And also a lot of storybooks and books that I grew up with that have that kind of, even if they're not, not Sleeping Beauty and Snow White, those kind of fairy tales, but storybook fantasy. So the Red Wall books, or the Black Cauldron, or you know, the Last Unicorn, or the Little White Horse, or the Farthest Away Mountain. All these storybook adventures where it's all about heart, and it's all about these little I call it humble magic, or these little kind of magical moments that have a big impact in the story and on the characters, rather than just being epic fantasy or that kind of thing. So the visuals of it is what always has inspired me, and then and those kind of characters and the heart behind it.
And we're back. Our dough has rested, has come together really nicely. If you see that pan in the back, ignore it, I made pasta. Now it's time to shape and bake. I'm just going to use my hands and kind of grab like maybe an inch long ball. I want these to be a little tiny because they're tea cookies. You're supposed to dip them in tea. I'm also going to make them like oblong because that's the perfect dipping shape in my opinion. Don't quote me, I'm not a geometry person. What do you call a person who studies geometry? I'm just gonna roll all these out by hand, leaving about 2 inches in between on my pan because they will spread out just a little bit. I've also preheated my oven to 325 degrees so that we can just go ahead and pop these in as soon as they're ready. I'm gonna take these bad boys, put them in my 325 degree oven for about 20 minutes or until they're nice and golden brown. Coincidentally, it's the perfect time to make a cup of tea. And also for Ryan to speak one more time. Go.
So mechanically, Perils and Princesses is inspired a lot by some contemporary NSR games. So I was reading a lot of those and playing a little bit of those while I was developing Perils and Princesses. So things like Into the Odd and Cairn, and those kind of 3-stat games. But what I wanted to do is make it so it made more sense in a fairy tale setting. So it's not quite as deadly as some of those games, but the chance of lasting consequences is there in the form of curses and things like that. But it's really built to be friendly to new players. So there's not a lot of modifiers or math or algorithms to determine anything. Pretty much always the dice are going to reveal what happens. So the basis of it is a 3-stat roll under, and then there's a magic system, which I call a gift, because every character in this game has a gift from their fairy godmother. And to invoke that gift, there's another set of dice, which is, I call them gift dice, but they're really inspired by the Goblin Laws of Gaming's magic dice, which is a little bit of an obscure kind of OSR system, but I thought it really worked well with Perils and Princesses because it's just kind of how much information is revealed in a single dice roll. So there's a couple other fun mechanics, but really it's stuff you've seen before, simplified, and then it's all about the flavor. It's all about how to incorporate the storybook magic into all that.
I'm gonna cut in real quick because I recently got to play Perils and Princesses with a team over at Spells and Whistles, and y'all, it was one of the most fun games I've played in a very long time. An innovative system, fun classes and flavoring, and just an all-around good time. There are 8 different princess classes that you can play as. I played as the Kitchen Magic Princess, of course. There's also a lot of fun ones like Sprightly Agility, Healing Touch, Elemental Connection, Wild Heart, and so many more. So please play this game. Also, you can check out that 3-part series I did with Spells and Whistles on June 9th. And there we have it, folks, our almond tea cookies for Perils and Princesses. Roll the glamour shots. Thank you all so much for watching this episode of Recipes for Adventures. I hope you enjoy these cookies as much as I did. Please check out Perils and Princesses, available wherever you want to buy games. Before I send us off, Ryan, any last words?
Next thing for Perils and Princesses is a full campaign setting book. It is called Sweet Revenge, and I'm going to be kickstarting it in the next couple months. I brought on a writer this time. Her name is Destiny Howell, and she's written this really cool campaign all about an evil witch in a cursed forest, and this witch has crafted this curse that's turning all these villagers into candy. So there's a lot of fun fairy tale tropes. It's got this perfect mix of whimsy, but also being kind of creepy too. I think it's going to be really fun, and a lot of people are going to love to dig in. So I'm excited to sort of get that kicked off and launched in July. So if you're interested in Perils and Princesses, it's on itch.io. It is on Indie Press Revolution is my distributor, and they've been sending it out to your local game stores, so look for it there. It's on a couple online retailers like Exalted Funeral and Tabletop Bookshelf, and I'm on social media at Outrider Creative on TikTok and Instagram and Threads too now. So yeah, if you want to keep up with me, that's where I am at. So thanks for having me.
And make sure you stick around here at Open Table Adventures, where we have more recipes, interviews, actual plays and one-shots, and so much more. As always, I've been Dan Baker. This has been Open Table Adventures, and you are always welcome to pull up a seat. Bye-bye.